Sleeping Dogs is a game I always return to, and it never fails to amaze me with how good it is. And using the word good is an unworthy descriptive word to use to summarize this video game. Sleeping Dogs is in fact phenomenal, and I have a tremendous amount of love for this title, which I've expressed countless times on this channel. Sleeping Dogs released back in August 2012 and released for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. Published by Square Enix and developed by United Front Games, they released one of the best open world crime games of all time in my opinion. Sleeping Dogs captivated thousands of gamers with their take on the third-person open world action game formula. I originally experienced Sleeping Dogs for the first time after the release of Red Dead Redemption 2, because I was craving another open world third-person action game. I owned Sleeping Dogs for the longest time, both the original and the definitive edition, but never got round to actually playing it. I finally played Sleeping Dogs, and at first I didn't really enjoy it, but I stuck with it and eventually saw this game for what it truly is: an undervalued masterpiece. And I say undervalued and not underrated, which most people commonly refer to Sleeping Dogs as nowadays, because in recent years, Sleeping Dogs has received the love and attention it truly deserves, with more and more people experiencing this game for the first time and appreciating it for the tremendous video game it is. There are so many content creators now covering Sleeping Dogs through their own video essays or presenting their first playthrough, and it's honestly extremely warming to see. If you hadn't guessed it, I'm a huge fan and one of the biggest advocates for Sleeping Dogs, with having more than 100 hours in it across multiple platforms, and also 100% completing the game twice. Oh yeah, I had to mention that. I thought I knew everything about Sleeping Dogs. I knew all of the story details and beats, with how each character's role in the story is fundamental in delivering a sensational story. I knew everything about its development history, such as how it was originally a true crime game before Activision canned the game, and then how Square Enix saw the potential in this project and gave it a chance. I even knew the inspiration behind the gameplay, such as combat, with Wei Shen's fighting style being influenced by UFC legend George St. Pierre, who helped United Front Games ensure that the combat felt authentic as possible to the real thing. However, there was one part of Sleeping Dogs that I never knew existed until a friend told me about it. What I had found out is that Sleeping Dogs had a multiplayer standalone title. Yes, that's right, Sleeping Dogs did at one point have a multiplayer standalone title named Triad Wars. Alright, so hear me out. Anytime someone mentions Sleeping Dogs around me, I always love to talk about it, and I enjoy hearing their experience with the game. One day during one of these discussions, a friend of mine tells me that Sleeping Dogs had multiplayer at one point. I didn't believe him at first and thought he was joking with me, but after a quick search, I found out it was indeed the real deal. Triad Wars was a multiplayer standalone title developed by the original developers of Sleeping Dogs, United Front Games, and once again published by Square Enix. The development of Triad Wars was in response to what the community had been telling the developers what they had wished for following the release of Sleeping Dogs. However, you will never get to play it. This is the cancelled Sleeping Dogs multiplayer. Triad Wars was set in the Sleeping Dogs universe, and once again it took place in Hong Kong. Announced on the 7th of October 2013, it was stated that Triad Wars was going to be an online open world action adventure game where your goal was to rise to power as a criminal kingpin of the Triad underworld. A year later, in September 2014, we received the official announcement trailer for Triad Wars, in which we got to see snippets of early build gameplay and hear from the developers on what this multiplayer title was going to be all about. The developers told fans in this direct official announcement that they were expanding the Sleeping Dogs universe. Sleeping Dogs was all about Wei Shen, whereas Triad Wars was going to focus on the criminal underworld of Hong Kong, and it was all about the player creating their own multiplayer experience. You took control of a Triad member, and your primary goal was to rise to the top of this criminal underbelly by raiding other online players' territories, taking their goods, and building your own empire. The developers confidently knew after Sleeping Dogs that they had built this excellent world of Hong Kong with great action mechanics, great driving, great shooting, I beg to differ, great running, and great fighting. They knew they had created something special and wanted to do something more with it. The developers shared that in Triad Wars, you play as an enforcer of your own design, running their own gang in the Hong Kong Triads, and from there, you would have built up your own gang and territory, essentially establishing your own criminal empire from there. You were given the freedom to choose what you wanted to do with your own territory in this online world. The developers described the player's territory as an extension of the player's personality, giving you the option as to what types of money rackets you wished to build and operate on your land. You can select from a variety of money rackets to operate, such as being able to counterfeit goods and counterfeiting currency. Each player would have a different experience from everyone else who plays, and to become one of these criminal kingpins, aka the Dragonhead in this online underworld of Hong Kong, you had to go out and raid real online people. It was promised that anyone who plays Triad Wars could have a fun and a competitive, entertaining experience, and the developers were completely open to receiving any type of feedback from the community who eventually would get their hands on the game. From this announcement trailer, it seemed extremely promising, and it was positive to see the developers were super passionate about expanding the Sleeping Dogs universe with this all new exciting project. The beta for Triad Wars released in 2015, and the product was extremely well polished, with very minor hiccups noticed. The core gameplay was everything you loved from Sleeping Dogs. Just like Sleeping Dogs, the brilliant hand-to-hand combat with the superb combination of martial art techniques mixed in was there. You could perform the same brutal executions against enemies using table saws, hanging them on meat hooks, or throwing them into meat grinders. The same janky and stiff shooting was there, and it wasn't refined or improved whatsoever for Triad Wars. It was essentially Sleeping Dogs, but with multiplayer. In the beta, you could choose what Triad faction you wanted to join. There was the 18K and Sun On Yee, which are present in the story of Sleeping Dogs, and then there was a new Triad faction which appeared named Xingwu. Each faction specialized in their own illegal activities. The 18K had mastered the art of counterfeiting, the Sun On Yee had a strong reputation for extortion, and the Xingwu are known for their many gambling rackets. After you had selected your faction, you could then choose your character's default appearance before being whisked away into the tutorial. The tutorial was straightforward and gave you an introduction to all of the gameplay mechanics while receiving instructions on what to do from your Uncle David, who is acting as your boss. In the tutorial, you're tasked with hitting a rival smuggling operation, then afterwards attacking the heart of the operation, where you had to move through the different rackets, taking down rival enemy gang members, then finally eliminating the enemy leader in their safe house. After completing the tutorial, you're thrown into the open world of Hong Kong, which you would have been familiar with if you had played Sleeping Dogs. Starting out at level 1, from here you got to select and run your own territory with whatever racket you wanted, and a safe house which could be upgraded over time, which would see visual changes reflecting your progressional success in the criminal underworld. Throughout playing, your rackets would reward you with money or assets which you could then go on to sell in export missions. Export missions were quick and easy missions you could start, which tasked you with protecting a black van as it drove your goods to the docks to sell your merchandise. If you didn't bother with these export missions, any assets sitting in your territory could be stolen from you if you were raided successfully by another online player. As you probably guessed it, the raids in Triad Wars are pretty important, and it's what the beta mainly focused on. There were side missions and other activities you could perform in the world, which tasked you with performing miscellaneous Triad jobs, but the raids were the primary focus during this testing phase. As presented to the player in the tutorial, raids allowed you to attack online players' territories and steal the supplies to support your own operations. When tackling a raid, you're given 3 objectives and a set amount of time to complete it before the cops show up. The 3 objectives were complete 1 racket, complete all rackets, and defeat the enforcer, which is the enemy online player. The rackets were the operations an online player would have built in their territory, which you would have to attack and eliminate the gang members protecting it. Once you've attacked all the rackets, you will finally face off against the enforcer, which was the player you were raiding. However, it wasn't actually their online player you had to fight, and instead it was an NPC representing them, which offered no challenge whatsoever. Completing a raid against another player's territory would reward you with materials, money, and face. Face is the leveling system that was featured in Sleeping Dogs, which allowed you to purchase fancier clothes, top tier vehicles, and within Triad Wars, Face gave the player more profitable racketing operations and ways to level up your rank. Players who participated in the beta said that they found the raids fun, But eventually over time, given the limited amount of content in the beta, it became repetitive since it was the best activity to perform to reach the highest rank, the Dragon Head. Ranks were different to levels. To level up, you needed experience from eliminating foes, performing side missions, activities, and completing raids. Fate was rewarded when you successfully completed a raid. An additional interesting feature was Fate was rewarded for preying at the crime scenes of your fallen online friends in the world and fallen enemies in your territory, which is a super interesting feature. So with the basic premises of Triad Wars summarized, that brings me on to everybody's favorite, microtransactions. Yep, you heard me correctly. Triad Wars featured microtransactions in the form of gold currency, since it was planned to be free to play upon full release. That's right, Triad Wars did it way before Red Dead Online even did it. However, the gold currency in Triad Wars wasn't as bad as it is in Red Dead Online. Yes, you could purchase gold currency with real world money, however it was extremely easy to obtain gold passively from just playing Triad Wars. By completing missions and raids, the game rewarded the player with cards which gave you gold for free. Then your safe house could launder money into 25 gold every day by just playing. The developers were pretty much handing out gold currency. Gold allowed you to purchase card packs which gave you buffs during raids such as infinite ammo and increased time to complete a raid. Then there were all of the cosmetic goodies that you could purchase with gold too, which were mostly the outfits Wake and Wear in Sleeping Dogs, and also purchasable top-of-the-line vehicles you could use to drive around and explore Hong Kong. The developers planned that in the coming months and years that they would add a bunch of new content to Triad Wars as it evolves. They had expectations that it was going to be a completely different game within 2 years, with possibly including content such as racing, fight clubs, karaoke, and more fun activities which were all featured in Sleeping Dogs. Not just that, it seemed they wanted to expand on the multiplayer rather than the only online aspect of Triad Wars being another player's territory which you could raid. It seemed they wanted multiple players to populate the same online session and explore Hong Kong together, similar to GTA Online, which would have been so exciting since I would have had so much fun exploring and running wild with my friends in the open world. Just imagine doing this with your friends while driving around Hong Kong and then jumping from vehicle to vehicle in a high-speed pursuit against other players, or even just fighting other online players with the superb hand-to-hand combat mechanics Sleeping Dogs prided itself in. There's so much fun that you and your friends could have done together. This online title had so much potential. So what happened to Triad Wars? Well, the overall reception from players who participated in the beta enjoyed it to begin with, but eventually over time found the gameplay loop to be extremely repetitive with no new content being added. Players eventually found Triad Wars to be boring since their only present online component during the beta was territory owned by a player. There were no online players in the world that you could randomly bump into. The multiplayer was solely territory owned by a player, and that was it. People went on to hate it and of course started to compare it to GTA Online, which most of the player base moved on to. During this time, the majority of the Sleeping Dogs fan base agreed that they didn't want a multiplayer title and instead would have preferred a sequel to Sleeping Dogs instead. Not just that, Triad Wars was marketed poorly, with people not even knowing it existed. I mean, I didn't for the longest time. In the end, given this was a free-to-play and the player base drastically reduced, which evidently resulted in the lack of microtransaction purchases, and also the fact that the developers were practically giving out the gold currency, the studio wasn't making enough money to keep Square Enix happy. Many members of the development team, such as the community manager, were then laid off. Then, finally, on the 23rd of December 2015, United Front Games announced the following. Since the start of the Triad Wars closed beta this year, diligent enforcers have run rampant through the streets of Hong Kong, killing rivals and building empires. During this time, we have gathered immense amounts of feedback, information, and data on the game. We've loved seeing how you play Triad Wars, but we know it wasn't right for many of you. So we're letting you know today that we are going to close the beta and service on January 20th, 2016 at 12 PM Pacific Standard Time. That's 4 weeks from today, and over this time, we're going to leave the game up and running for you to continue to enjoy, but we will not be accepting any more purchases. To help you enjoy these final 4 weeks, we're going to make gold available free of charge, and we'll shortly be posting news on the forums about how to deal with refunds on unused gold. Thank you very much for all the testing, feedback, and support. Players later on did indeed receive refunds for their gold purchases, which was a nice gesture from United Front Games. So, on the 20th January 2016, the Sleeping Dogs multiplayer standalone title, Triad Wars, was shut down and was never to be seen ever again. Unfortunately, that same year, in October 2016, United Front Games announced their closure, and any hopes or possibilities of the continuation of the Sleeping Dogs series being developed by them was gone for good. It is extremely disappointing that this was the end of United Front Games, and it also presents the sad truth of the gaming industry, which is such a common occurrence nowadays. If your game releases and it doesn't perform financially well for what the publishers had hoped for, then your studio is up on the chopping block. As announced in a report by Square Enix, they considered Sleeping Dogs, along with Tomb Raider and Hitman Absolution following their releases, to be development successes, but commercial failures. So instead of receiving a sequel to Sleeping Dogs, the developers had hoped that a multiplayer standalone title would be just what they needed to ensure their success. But sadly it wasn't. It seems like they tried to compete against Rockstar Games' incredibly successful GTA Online and do something similar, but ultimately failed, since GTA Online had become the staple mark for open world online crime games to experience with your friends. I'm still hoping that one day a studio does decide to pick up Sleeping Dogs and gives it the much deserved sequel we have all been desperately wanting, or even a reboot for that matter. However, the fact that we even got Sleeping Dogs to begin with is a miracle, since it was canned by Activision before it was picked up by Square Enix, and they saw the potential in this project. There are hopes though that Sleeping Dogs will continue, but not in the form of video games, and instead as a movie, with famous Hollywood actor Simu Liu actively pursuing to produce, which I am beyond excited to see if it does in fact happen. The more I think of Triad Wars, the more I think of the possibilities of what the online could have looked like if it received the correct support of additional content and much needed improved online features. Being able to experience Sleeping Dogs with friends would have been a fantastic gaming opportunity, but one we'll never get. Nevertheless, if nothing ever happens with the Sleeping Dogs series, it will be remembered as one of the best open world crime games of all time. I'd really like for people to share what they would have liked to have seen in Triad Wars in the comment section down below. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. Also, if you do enjoy content like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and click on the bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next upload. With that being said, I want to give a special shout out to my YouTube members and Patreon supporters: Cyberboy, Camino VT, Salvi, George Kent, Luke AV, BPG, Veggie Hot Dog, Whaley, Swift, Stam Shaw, Storm Mage, Sue Halep, Cheesy Chicken Gran, Rachel Vincent, Joshua Wright, Toxic Gamer 23, Forest Till I Die, Slack 8 Gaming, and Cat Smith. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.